Hello and welcome to this technical walkthrough of the Doctor's Cure. This is a first look at the game to show some of the gameplay, and then we'll look at the tech behind various scenes that are part of what we're seeing here. The Doctor's Cure team had 4 programmers: David Kuntz, Logan Barnett, Corey Nolan, and Alex Burley. And what we're seeing now is the intro, which introduces the Remixers, a group that fights against the forces of Magnus. And this is not a physical fight so much as a philosophical fight about how to use technology to enhance or help the lives of others. There's a lot of gameplay to show, so I'm going to fast forward when it is possible. But first we see this interaction between Adam and Evelyn, who introduced the problem of remixer technology being misapplied. This shows off the dialogue system and the logic system. For example, the triggering of this dialogue was done via the logic system. Everything that you're seeing right now was completely designer generated and didn't need a programmer involved once the dialogue system was created. Here we see the character customizer. This allows the player to choose from a variety of meshes that make up the head, torso, legs, and feet, as well as texture options and color tinting for those that allow you to customize the eye color, and then you'll see here hair color, shirt color, that sort of thing. This is dynamically regenerating the mesh that you see on the left. The head, torso, legs, feet are all combined into one mesh for efficiency, as well as the texture that is applied to that. The UVs are remapped into a larger texture space to accommodate all the textures being atlased dynamically. The eyes are rendered using a shader because they change so often due to blinking and the different expressions that can happen. And as a result, those are dynamically generated. Here we have the acquisition of the remixer device by the player. And as you'll see, it's a tabbed 2D interface that allows the designers to provide a bunch of information to the player, such as map hint information, current mission, and then later it will be the place where you actually write your report for submission to your teacher. Currently, most of those tabs are turned off or disabled. You can also change your avatar look at any time by coming in here. So technically you could come in and change your race, gender, clothing options, anything like that. You can change and it will dynamically be updated. Another item reveal, and the last core item that you're going to collect that is used throughout all units, the backpack. It's a simple inventory type system, a grid where you can drag and rearrange what's in your backpack. This is primarily used for interactive items. Items that directly apply to a specific tool are still treated as items within the system, but don't necessarily show up in the backpack unless you can directly interact with them. This is used for things like documents that in later units need to be inspected so that you can extract information out of them. This teleportation sequence here with the various particle effects and camera transitions was 100% done through the logic system. We support moving of camera along tweens, for an example, creation and destruction of objects, enabling and disabling of objects, all of that sort of thing. So this was able to be done by a single designer in an afternoon. Here we're introduced to one of the main characters of the game, Gracie, a reporter at the local newspaper, The Bugle. She tells you about the plight of the town, how there's a plague going on, and how she has become infected, and that the primary point of her existence is to communicate the need for investigative reporting and the need to gather evidence that supports your thesis and to write a persuasive argument. In town now, you can see another example of a dialogue that has dynamic camera angles. Typically, when there's a dialogue, the system automatically positions the camera in a place that looks directly at the NPC that is speaking. In this case, explicit camera angles were used to bounce between the two people who are talking. The quote book seen here is a unit-specific system that was written just for the Doctor's Cure. Each unit has several such unit-specific systems. That was done by the programmers and not the designers, although the usage of the quote book when it appears, the quotes that are added to it, and things of that nature were exposed to the designers, so that was done through the logic system that we'll see later. Here we see the map again from earlier, this time giving a map hint. Map hints are associated with missions, which are defined as part of our variable system, where we store all our variables, called the variable store, and it references a game object in the scene as being the target of the next mission. One thing to point out here is that characters often change their expression on their face and their physical animation during dialogue. This is defined as part of the dialogue, and there's fields to set the initial animation as well as the ending animation, so that those can change, as well as the change of the expression set. And those expression sets are defined universally and then can be applied to any character. Here we see a second unit-specific tool, the persuasive argument tool. In this version, only the 6 evidence slots are unlocked, but in the final version, experienced later, both the thesis and the reason slots are unlocked, allowing quite a lot of variation in terms of the possible combinations you can make. Once the evaluate button is pressed, then the logic evaluates to determine a score for each of those connections between the evidence and the thesis, and then between the thesis and the reason, and that will determine what your score is shown. Once a adequate score is provided, you'll get feedback on that, and the story will be allowed to progress. So this persuasive argument tool here is writing a variable out to the variable store, such that the designers can query it and have characters react to what's been done. Here we see the report writing interface that is part of the Remixer device. That tab is now enabled, and in the future, once you've written a few reports, clicking on the report tab itself will show you all your previous reports. A common thing that is needed is for review of the report past the point in which the game has allowed you to progress. We can also see that the results of your PAT have been recorded. This view right here is actually a web page, and it's the same interface minus the background that would be seen on the web page. So a player could go and finish this completely outside of the game, and they would see this lower part of the screen here. They would see the same sort of graphical representation of the pad, sort of done in a notebook style. This allows the students to work either in the game, or if the teacher wants to prevent people from moving ahead, they can turn off access to the game, but still allow access to the website. Here we are back in the editor, in the intro, taking a look at the first dialogue between Adam and Evelyn. Dialogue is defined in our variable store, of which there are many types of variables. So we're going to look at the dialogue tab, which filters based on dialogue type. We'll look at the first dialogue from Remix or Adam. There's no time for that, Evelyn. We can't wait any longer. As you can see here, there's a lot of options on what to configure the dialogue to do. First off, are you speaking to a human, which would be talk, or an object, which would be other? This is useful for, say, a phone ringing and someone talking to you through the phone, but you're not physically looking at the person. There's the camera location that you can set. This is what allowed us to have dynamic cameras that bounce between two different speakers as part of a conversation. And then you can see the various responses that are defined and the next dialogue that you will be taken to if you choose that response. In this case, both responses take you to the same dialogue. Taking a look back at the logic behind this conversation, let's start with the start argument logic block. A logic block is a container for three things: a trigger, or any number of triggers, in this case, when the player is within 8 units of Adam, a condition, in this case, a variable not being set to true, and then some number of actions to carry out if that condition is true or not true. In this case, showing the Remix or Adam argument dialog with both responses. There are many things that you can do with dialog and with the logic system. Most of the gameplay is generated via this system. As you can see here, when a certain response is chosen, in this case, argument for a Remix or Adam, the response, "Thanks for giving me a chance," what happens is a message is sent. This message can be received by any object in the scene, and then also 2 animations are triggered. It happens to be that the message is received by another logic block on the same object, in this case, the one titled Teleport Away. The condition is just true, so it just falls through directly. And then we do a bunch of things. We disable Adam and Evelyn. We create 2 warp particle effects. And then we play a sound, the warp sound effect, at the Adam position at full volume. This shows some of the kinds of interactions that can be generated with a logic system like this with designers who are not formally trained in programming. Finally, we'll take a look here at this first logic block, the onStart, that just sets up that dialog started variable to false to initialize it when the scene starts. There's a variety of variable types, your primitives, strings and floats, as well as more complex things such as documents and items and meters that can all be affected. As part of the character definition, which we will see in just a moment, as well as in dialogue, you can define at various points an emotion to be used. These emotions are generic. They're used across all characters, and they are defined as a set of eye, mouth, and eyebrow shapes and styles to be used. So in this case, the sly smile, we have a left eye of squint, a right eye of squint, left and right eyebrow of angry, and a mouth of crooked. In this case, both the left and the right eye are the same, but there's no reason that has to be true. For example, a wink would be a staring left eye and a closed right eye. And the left and right eyebrows are also changed to match that. As part of the character definition, along with all the logic that will be needed for that character, we also have the character appearance editor. This is useful for defining basically what you saw in the runtime character customizer, but with a few more options. So you can do all the standard things, gender, age. Here you can set the emotion and the default animation, but you can also do things like set a group of weighted animations to be used when idling. So the character will transition between these in its idle state. Then there's other things such as whether the character should look at the player, should turn to face the player. Some tinting options that are more in-depth than was capable in the runtime character customizer, including things like setting the blink rate, the skin tone, which is similar to the character customizer, and then the parts, the torso, legs, feet that were shown in the character customizer. Here you see the actual asset names that are being used instead of a picture, but the functionality is the same, including the tinting. So here we'll try changing the Adams character to use a different sweater, and you'll see a graphical effect. The area where the head is composited into multiple pieces is now white because there's no runtime generation of that texture. It's only used at runtime, so currently it is missing. If we hit run and then stop, it will be regenerated and persist back into edit time. And now we see the character restored. The next thing we can look at is the accessories. So as you can see, this character has one arm accessory, which is the left wrist accessory, has a tinting of white, meaning just full color. But it's possible to, using the system, add the apron to the blacksmith or the hammer in the blacksmith's arm that he waves, things like that. I'd like to thank the rest of the programming team and all of Secret Fog Studios, without which none of this would have been possible. Thanks for watching.